Hi, this is your mosaic book that you've got all about Roman mosaics. So let's take a walk through here with you. If we just go inside. So this is all about Roman mosaics, what they were, how they made them, and what to look for in them. So let's get on. This is a history one. Now, you should have seen that other video, which is about the history of Roman mosaics, and that has gone through this whole sheet here. Let's go into how did they make them. Now we have to rely on what we found because there aren't any books, there aren't any Roman mosaicist manuals left. If there were any instructions, they would have just been handed down between the members of the workshop and from the master to the apprentice and so on like that. But what we have found is some of the evidence for the way that they worked is once they had all these tesserae cut, what they would do is sometimes they'd put a layer of cement down on the floor, and so they had a layer of wet cement on the floor. Then they'd paint just a rough pattern, a rough guideline, and it was called synopia. Sinopia. And if you look at this drawing here on the right hand page down the bottom, these are the layers of the floor. So you've got something called statumen, which was basically large rocks. Rudus, which is smaller ones. Nucleus, which was much finer. That was still the dry bed of the floor. And then the setting bed, which was not really a layer of cement. So it was on this wet cement layer that they would paint these lines. And that was, you can see here, that's synopia there. And then just press the tesserae into the wet cement. Another way that we know they worked, as you can see here, called etched lines. They would just get the dry bed, so you can see here we've got up to the rudis, you've got the nucleus, so this is a dry layer here, and they would etch some lines in, and then put a little bit of cement down, and follow the shapes. You use whatever shapes here. So you can see here, all the squares are diagonally incised into triangles. And what they've done is they've used here for this one, this is triangles. This one they've just done a square. But here on this, they've used this like a black charcoal wash as a paint, and they're creating that border. So you've got the two ways. You've got synopia, which was painted lines. They've got etched lines here. And up here on the other page, it's possible that they worked without any guidelines. For some of the mosaics, even really complex patterns, because they were doing it all the time for years and years. They might have started at 7 or 8 years of age and just carried on doing that almost every day. So quite quickly, they'd become good enough to be able to work like this. Let's go over the page. Now, how did they cut the stone? They had what we call a hammer and hardy. You can see the hammer there. This is a modern version. And there's like an upturned chisel set in a block of wood. You see, I'm just holding the marble between, and you drop the hammer on, and because you've got a blade at the top and the bottom, it breaks up the marble. Now, over on the right here, you can see this is from somewhere in Ostia, and this was two stone workers doing the cutting there, and we think this is the master here, and you can see how they're cutting using tools like this. Now, a bit of a maths question for you down the bottom here. Average the cubes, the tesserae, the mosaic pieces were about 10 mil, sort of 8 to 12 mil. So we've got an average of 10 mil or 3/8 of an inch if you use it that way. Now, if you had a square of 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters, so 3 foot by 3 foot, you would need between 8 to 10,000 tesserae in it. So 8 to 10,000 of the mosaic tiles just for this 100 by 100 square. So that 100 centimeters is 1 meter. And if we had a room that was 4 meters by 4 meters, how many tesserae would you need? So you'd have to times 4 by 4, and then what your answer is, you need to times 8 to 1,000 and 10,000 to see if you can get your answer. That's in the back for you. Now, who were they? We don't really know, because they worked with their hands, therefore they were manual workers, so they weren't really important enough for the writers to say anything about. Now, what we do have is in 301 CE, one of the emperors set the prices across the empire, and in that list we can see a mosaicist was paid 60 denarii a day. Now that's only 10 denarii more than a blacksmith or a baker, so they weren't really great artists in the way that we think of. They were just a little bit better than a blacksmith or a baker, because they just worked with their hands. Now, we've got like a dream team here of these mosaic workers, of everybody who's involved in doing the work, and we've got the Latin names from them from that same list where they set the prices. Now, number 1, we got Pictor Imaginarius. So Latin's a painter of images. So he could have been doing a painted scene, and that would have been just like a picture that you hang on your wall, the same as nowadays. That might have been a fresco picture, but it's something that went on the wall. Now, he would be the highest paid out of all the team, because artists like that were a little bit more important than the others. But then next you have a Pictor Parentarius. This is an artist who was able to take the image that the Pictor Imaginarius had done and scale it up and draw that out on the floor, or have enough of a guide so the mosaicists were able to follow. Now you get down to the mosaic workers, the mosaris and the tessellaris, depending on whether it was a wall or a floor they were doing. Tessellaris tends to have been on the floor. So there would have been a number. This is where you would have had the most, and you might have had a trained mosaicist, and then he'd have his top assistant working with him, and that would be one team. And you could have a number of teams working on the floor. Further down, and this is where you might just have your slaves, lapidaris structor. It's an unskilled stone cutter. They just sat and cut the stone. We saw that in the image on the previous page, and that's all they would do. They would just cut the stone all day. Last one, calces cocta. This would have been a slave who prepared the mortar, the cement, the wet cement. They would have just done that all day. But it is quite important that the cement that they used to push the tesserae in was just the right mix, just the right consistency. Because if it was too wet, if they used too much water to mix it up, then the tesserae wouldn't stay in place. But if it was too dry, then you wouldn't be able to push the tesserae in them. So it's quite an important job, but it's still something that would have been done by a slave. So we go over on the page here. What I've done is I've done some drawings of all the different jobs, and here you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and see if you can match that up with the jobs that I've drawn. Now, what happened to the mosaics after the end of the Roman Empire? Because they were so labour intensive, because they took so much work, they didn't really last that long as a job. People would have just larger tiles on their floor. So as we saw in the history from about the 6th century CE, floor mosaics really fell out of fashion there. Now, when these villas and other buildings were abandoned, the walls would fall down, so that's why we have so few of the frescoes left, but they would cover over the mosaics on the floors. So when we did rediscover them, we're able to see exactly what they were, because all the mosaics were protected for a while. What did they have in the mosaics? Well, they had a lot of different scenes in there. You see, here's a mosaic of a flower. If you go to countries like North Africa, regions like North Africa, they have a lot of these flowers in mosaics, flowers and vines, and that was just that particular style. They had patterns, geometric patterns you can see here. This is what we call a guilloche, and it's like a plait there, and we'll see how we can recognize those. We go on. A couple of racehorses here, Diomedes, Alcides. They were very popular. Going to the circus, going to the races was a very popular pastime for the Romans, so they featured quite a lot in these mosaics. Fish, you see, if you look at your map, the Roman Empire was all around the Mediterranean, so obviously seafood, big part of their diet, so fish would feature in a lot of mosaics. And like the racehorses, gladiators, very popular pastime to go and watch them, and they would have their favourite ones, and they were a bit like the footballers of today. You'd be following your favourite gladiator, you'd be going and seeing them as often as you can, and so in the mosaics, they were a popular image that you'd see. Here we've got the river god Euphrates, so parts of the Greek myths, parts of the Roman myths, they would feature a lot in there, and really sort of explaining what they meant to the Romans, how they figured in their life. This one I'm sure you might have seen before. It's called Cave Carnum, which is Latin for beware of the dog. And these were on the threshold, these were on near the front entrances to some villas. And whether they actually meant they had the dog in there, but it was just a warning to people. And down here, we got a skeleton. Now, what they had in this was, this was showing the Romans, this was reminding them that we only have a short life, and to make the most of it. And you see, he's got a couple of jugs in his hand, which might have been filled with wine. So he's saying, enjoy your life now, because I'll be coming along soon. This is taken from a mosaic. This is a Minotaur's maze, so from an earlier myth. And what you need to do here, the maze is always going to take you to the Minotaur. So you want to see how quickly you can get to find him. Word search there, I'll give you one away first. Mosaics there, that's easy enough to see. See if you can find all the others in there. And this one is to finish the pattern. What's happened is part of the mosaic is missing. We had a look at this one earlier when we spoke about etched lines. So what you need to do is colour this in just in black and white, and just follow the rest of the pattern. Now you see here, these are triangles. You've got square, triangle, what's going to be in there. Look at the way that the squares, the triangles, are done. Look at the way up here. You've got a triangle on the left, a white triangle on the left and the right. But here, the triangles are on the top and the bottom. So we just colour that in to finish it off. Now this one is another one where you have to find the shape. I've started this one off here. This is just a geometric shape. Now you can see here, this strand, this band of colour here, goes underneath this one, but it goes over that one. Goes underneath this one, goes over that one. See if you can work out and colour in the rest of this pattern, and then try and find some more in there, and they're all a particular shape. Now if you look at this mosaic, you'd think this mosaic is made up of circles, but it's actually not. Finish colouring that in, do some more of them, find the shape, and that's actually the pattern that this mosaic is made from. It's not circles, it's something else. Now sometimes they would just use lines and lines of tesserae and change the colours, and all these patterns here are taken from original Roman mosaics, and as you can see there, they've got 2 white, then a black, 3 white, then a black, then 2 white, and going up, keep going, and they've just changed the colours You see how it's built up, that pattern. You see it's built up. All these patterns are just changing in colours in the lines. And you've got one here, you can have a go. See if you can make your own pattern through there. Now, patterns and geometry. The patterns that you see in the mosaic, now that there are different parts to them. If we go down the bottom here, down this one, this is what we call a Solomon's knot. That's not actually a motif. If we look at the bottom left here, you can see what's the pattern here. The pattern is two chain links together. You see there's the green one, there's the red one. That's the pattern. It's two chain links interwoven, two loops interwoven. But if you were drawing this out and being really correct with it, you'd use what we call geometric shapes. Now, can you see here? What's the geometry here? The geometry is circles. It's 4 circles. If you look at this way, you can imagine how they actually fit on there. And that makes the mosaic. So the pattern is 2 chain links, but the geometry is 4 overlapping circles. If we go up here, you can see this is a border pattern. Now this is like those guilloche, the plait ones. Now I've coloured this in so you can see it's 3 separate strands plaited together. But if we drew it out using the geometry, it's over 2 lines of overlapping circles, and that makes this triple strand guilloche. Up the top here, can you just see, you might find this a bit easy if you look on here, the pattern. What's the pattern? The pattern is these heart shapes. So you've got 4 heart shapes interwoven, but what's the geometry? It's circles and squares. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 circles and 2 squares. If you look back on here, can you see them? There's your circle, there's your circle, there's your circle, and your 2 squares. So you have pattern, and then you have the geometry. Now over here, what I want you to do is try and match the shapes, the pattern shapes, to the mosaics there. So you can just draw a line to see which connects with it, which one of these that you can do. So when you look at a geometric Roman mosaic, try to have a look and think, what's the pattern, and then also what's the geometry that's underneath. Now this is something that you can look out for as well in the geometric patterns. When we talk about these strands, so these bands that are interwoven and looped in, there is a quick way to find out what the names of some of these are, of these patterns here. So you see we've got down the bottom left here, we've got border patterns, and you'll have long bands of these going all the way around the floor. Now if you want to know what the name is, if you want to know how many strands, how many separate plaits there are in the mosaic, is a quick way to do it. If you look at these single white, the tesserae, the mosaic tiles, you can see the single white ones here. See down the bottom here, you can see all these single white ones. Now if you count those on a diagonal line, this is just for the border patterns, so count them on a diagonal line, add 1 to that number, and that's how many separate plaits there are. So if we go up the top, start here, you can see there's only 1 there. 1 plus 1 is 2. This is a double strand guilloche, and you can see there's only 2 separate plaits. Come down here. On that diagonal line, there's 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. Triple strand guilloche border pattern. Last one down here. Count the number of single white center tesserae on the diagonal line. 1, 2, 3. Always plus 1 is 4. So we know that this plait pattern, this guilloche, is made up of 4 strands. So it's a 4-strand guilloche border. It's the same sort of thing with these motifs as well. We had a look at the Solomon's knot earlier. Now what you need to do is find the long edge of these motifs rather than with the short edge. You want as many of these single white center tesserae as you can. Now you count those, 1, 2, and then you divide that number by 2. Whatever the number is, divide that number by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so this is a single Solomon's knot, and that's very easy to see. Let's go down to the bottom one, skip the middle one. Here I've got this turned round, so it's a bit easy for you. How many of these single white center tesserae are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So this is a double Solomon's knot. But notice the way that they've coloured these in. If you followed the line, these strands, that doesn't make sense the way they've done it, but that's just what this mosaic was made like. But we know that this is 2 Solomon's knots. So you've got one there, and there's its partner going across the centre there. Then you've got another one, and going across the centre, another one there. So that's a double Solomon's knot. So count the number of single white centre tesserae all the way along one side, divide that by 2. Now if we look at this one here, this is a very common one. Now if we count the tesserae, the single white center tesserae, 1, 2, 3. So that's an odd number. Divide 3 by 2, you get 1 remainder 1. Now if there is an odd number, then that means there's an interwoven square. Can you see this red one here? There, that's an interwoven square. So if it's an odd number, when we count along the side there, if it's an odd number, that means there is an interwoven square in there as well. So we take that one out. So 3 across there. It's an odd number, so I'm going to take 1 away. I know that that 1 means there's a square in there. So we're left with 2. So 2 divided by 2, it's 1. So you have a Solomon's knot. Can you see the links there and there? A Solomon's knot with an interwoven square. So if it's an even number, then you just divide that by 2. Whatever your answer is, that's how many Solomon's knots there are in there. If it's an odd number, and this is quite a common one, you'll see. So if it's an odd number, you know that there is an interwoven square there. So take that one off and divide what you've got left by 2. It's however many Solomon's knot there with an interwoven square. Now, we've got the answers at the back of the book for you, and here is just some of the terms you'll see in the book. So, have a go and enjoy.